Hello guys, and thank you for joining me again today. Today I'm going to use the Zibo mod in X-Plane 11 and I'm going to fly from Durban to Johannesburg, and I hope you enjoy the flight with me. This is not a training flight as such, but I'm pretty sure it will be educational if you follow me closely nonetheless. Building on what I showed you previously, I used SimBrief for the flight planning and dispatch document again today. As you can see, that is on the screen right now. I have already highlighted the important information that I need. I have also used Navigraph to check on the SIDs, the stars, and a couple of other things like the airport elevation and runway headings. All we really need to do now is to get in the cockpit and start the pre-flight checklists. Cockpit preparation checklist. Parking brake, set. Landing gear, down. Speed brake, down. Flaps, up. Battery, on guard. Standby power, on guard. Generator disconnect, guards down. Bus transfer guard is down. Ground power on. Internal and external lights as required. Logo on, position light steady. IRS mode selector. According to our dispatch sheet, we need to have 6,122 kilograms of fuel. That's close enough for us, so let us refuel. While that is happening, we can load the passengers and check the cargo. Fine. .25 centimeters. as usual we are using GPS left for the IRS positioning, otherwise it simply won't work like we said earlier in previous videos. We are going to insert the destination. If we do not insert the destination, we cannot import the company route properly. From the dispatch sheet and from the meter we know that runway 06 is active and we are flying a mango flight, so we'll enter that as well, activate and execute. The departures of runway 6, shutdown 1 alpha, that is correct. And we can just check the legs and we have to wait for IRS alignment now. So the IRS has just finished its alignment and we can now continue checking the legs page. One of the questions that I see often is what is this message about, why do we get that, etc. If we look at the FMC at this point in time. The reason why this message comes up when it does is to remind us that the IRS is still not aligned. What we need to do now is make sure that there are no discontinuities or double inscriptions in our legs page. And we are okay, there is no issue over here. Our next step will be to go to the preference initialization page where we can enter the gross weight. Our reserves will be 1 and the cost index we use is 6. One of the issues you will see right now is we are not getting to flight level 320 as we were dispatched. The interesting thing is to get there we need to also include the arrival. We therefore have to backtrack a little bit, go to our arrivals page and select the appropriate arrival, 3 right on the ILS and standard in 1 Charlie. Execute, go back to the leg page and now check for discontinuities or double inscriptions again. And we are fortunate there is no issue with this plan. Now if we go back, you will immediately see that the trip and cruise altitude is much higher, almost 10,000 feet higher than what it was without the SID and the star being programmed properly. You can always change your star later if there is a wind change and the weather does not allow the original plan. If ATC changes it, if you go to your alternate, whatever the case might be, you can always change it later. But at least now we can select flight level 320. Our cruise winds, according to our dispatch document, is 262 at 39 and our temperature is 9. 262 at 39 and our outside temperature will be 9, and just want to check that one once more. 262 at 39, correct. And we can execute. We are now going to move to the N1 limit page. There are a couple of things you need to do here. You need to work out the assumed temperature, which is 39. So you need some form of calculator or you need to be a good guesser. We know it's 39, we will remember that one. And to get the outside temperature, we're going to look over here. It is 26. We can enter it this way. Just to refresh your memory, you can put the /26 and press line select key left 1. We can also enter it as a shortcut method by just pressing the button. Our assumed temperature we just checked was 39, and in the calculation we also used a derate takeoff 2. We are going to climb normally because this is a very short flight, and there is no time to waste to get to our cruise altitude. We then go to takeoff. We have to put in flaps 5. We have to click on our CG. It will give us the trim, and we now have our V speeds that we can enter. Referring back to the checklist, we see that it requires us to just make sure the IRS is aligned, and we can definitely see that it is because all the instruments are working. Our next step will be the pre-flight procedure, and we go to the overhead yaw damper on. Crossfeed is closed, the fuel pumps are all off. Radios, we can now set the radios. I'm just going to leave everything as is. 122.8 is good for Unicom on Watson and Iveo. I'm not flying online right now, but it's good enough for us. The squawk code, transponder code, we are just going to use whatever is in here, and we know it should be on standby right now. The next step would be to set the altimeter units of measure. Currently it is not where we need it to be, so we put it on hectopascal, and we now just need to check the QNH, what it is currently. Okay, that seems to still be the same, but let us double check. QNH 1013, and we are happy. That is standard atmosphere. Next step, the cabin utility switch needs to be on, and the passenger seat switch needs to be on. Exterior doors can now close, and we can now obtain our push and start clearance. This time the plane was acknowledged, and we will call through the menu when we are ready. Thank you, sir. Pre-flight procedures continue with the APU being switched on. APU generators on and ground power off. Equipment, supply and exhaust both are normal. Emergency exit lights can be armed. The no smoking signs as well as the passenger seatbelt signs go on. The left and right wiper blades are in park and the engine start switch is both. Window heat power test. Good. We then switch on all the window heat switches. Probe heat remains off until engine start. Anti-ice all off, not required right now. The hydraulic pumps on the engine 1 and engine 2 are on. The electrical hydraulic pumps are off. Trim air on. The recirculation fan switches are auto. Pack switches auto. Isolation valve open. Engine bleed switches on. APU bleed switch on. Our cruise altitude is 32,000 feet and our landing altitude is 5,000 feet for runway 3 right at Oliver Tambo. There is an altitude difference between the actual airport and the runways, and also this very runway has got two altitudes depending on whether you land on 3 right or 1 left. For our purposes we are landing at 5,000 feet on 3 right. The pressurization selector is on auto. Auto brake selector, RTO, and the EFIS panel is set the way we want it to be. We can now arm auto throttle as well as the flight directors. The captain goes on first and secondly the first officer. Our speed indicator will be set according to V2, which is 143, I beg your pardon. As a rule of thumb, at this point in time I usually switch the LNAV and the VNAV on, or VNAV, LNAV in the order I did it just now. This is a check for me. I'm not sure if this will work always. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't work always, but it's a good rule of thumb. If these two lights do not come on right now, it usually means you forgot to switch on the first officer's flight director. It could also mean that you forgot to execute one of the commands on the FMC, or that there is a problem on the FMC. So if you find that these two do not go on at this point in time, just retrace your steps, make sure the flight directors are on where they should be and in the right order, make sure there's no discontinuities in your flight plan, and make sure that your FMC was executed every time it requested to be executed. Press the button, that's the big story. Our flight deck windows are closed and locked, and we have completed our taxi and takeoff briefing. Before start procedure. Fuel pumps left and right on. Because we have loaded fuel in the center tank, we are going to switch the center tank's fuel pumps on as well. The electric hydraulic pumps will come on now. Anti-collision light on. And we need to set the trim. We are now going to call the pushback truck, and then while we're doing the pushback, we will do the engine start procedure. We can also clear the FMC error message, as there clearly is no error on the FMC. I've just realized that I never set, after setting the speed, I never set the runway heading or the altitude, the initial altitude or cruise level. So runway 06 is 62 degrees, and we don't have ATC, we do not have an initial altitude, so we are just going to climb straight up to flight level 320. Release parking brake. Engine start procedure. Air conditioning packs need to go to off. Engine 2 start switch set, and now we need to wait for N2 to reach 25%, and then we can add the fuel. Start engine 1. Good start. Before taxi checklist. Engine 1 and 2 generators on. APU switch off. Probe heat switches on. My goodness. Anti-ice as required, we really don't need them now. Air conditioning packs auto. Isolation valve auto. APU bleed off. Engine start switches goes to continuous, and the flaps 5 for takeoff. Taxi lights on. Flaps 5, green light. Clear left. Parking brakes released. Now, depending on air traffic control and the SOP of the airport, and depending probably on how you feel when you fly offline as well, you can actually set your transponder to TA already and TARA later. I'll leave mine until we get to the runway and do the runway entry procedure. Well, that worked well for the brake check as well. Runway entry procedure. Taxi lights off. Landing lights on. Position lights, strobe and steady. Now we definitely have to switch this to TARA on the transponder. The weather radar can be switched on, and the terrain radar as required. We don't need that. Clear left.
Approaching 06.
So this is going to be interesting. 040 at 21. Previously it was gusting at 31 knots as well. I don't like taking off in winds like that with this particular aircraft, because it gets to a point where it becomes difficult to steer on the runway for me personally and my equipment at least, but let us see what happens now. Takeoff power set. Rotate. Positive right gear up. Command A. Standard set. After takeoff procedure. Landing gear is up and off. Flaps retracted. Autopilot is engaged and the auto brake is off. We have just gone through the transition altitude and standard is set. $10,000. Landing lights are off. The engine start switches can go to auto. And our position light can go to steady. So I'm just going to let the aircraft climb up to 32,000 feet and I will be back with you just before top of descent when we will check the METARs, get the relevant information on the active runways and set up the FMC appropriately if we need to change anything. We are about 103 nautical miles from our top of descent. We're going to start the planning shortly, but I just thought I'd show you the weather radar and some of the clouds, and I can see XP is acting up a little bit there, but just have a look, see where we're flying now. Some nice clouds here and some water in there. There is apparently thunder showers at Joburg, so we are in for quite a bit of a treat when we go to land there just now. Descent checklist. Reset MCP altitude. We are going to go down to 8,000 feet. You will find this information on the charts, by the way, if you are unsure where I get it, it just comes off the charts. Auto brake, we're going to set to 2. Then we need to check the V-speeds. And we're going to land on flaps 30, so we're going to click on this button twice to make sure that we get the correct reference speed at the end. Then, very importantly, and not many people seem to know this for some reason, we need to enter under the descent page. We need to go to forecast and enter the transition level at our destination. Transition altitude is 8,000 feet at Johannesburg, and then we need to go and check our nav frequencies and also set our course up for the ILS. I have looked this up already. The frequency for runway 03 right ILS is 109.10. It is set on both nav1 and nav2, and we have a course heading of 34 degrees on captain and FO's course indicator. So at this point in time, the aircraft is set up to commence with the descent once it reaches the top of descent point in our flight plan, and I will talk with you again once we get close to top of descent. I've just extended the speed brakes to help the aircraft slow down for the top of descent. Okay, speed brakes are retracted now. So the descent begins. I want to wait another couple of minutes and just check if there isn't a temporary meteor up because of the thunder showers that was reported earlier. This Zibo mod at this point in time in the build that we are on seems to be handling the VNAV path excellently. I'm thoroughly impressed. Speed brakes extended again for the deceleration. Not too bad. After we make the next turn, everything is going to start to happen very fast. I usually at some point just after the turn take control of the speed manually and go for the manual intervention there, just to facilitate the aircraft to slow down enough so we can cope with the workload and come in super good. We are so close, even our glide slope is alive already. That over there should be the airport if I'm not mistaken. That patch over there. So we are very close. I'm going to enable the V-lock already, just to make sure that we do capture the localizer. And the moment there's movement on the glide slope, I will go over to the approach phase and hit the button there. As you can see, there is a decelerate indication there on our ND. I seem to find that that's just too close for comfort. So when that comes to about 10 miles, I am going to do a manual intervention and just start to slow down the aircraft. Man, these gusts. Those ones on takeoff were ginormous at 31 knots. Just look what it did now again. I'm going to use the speed brake to assist me to brake a bit better. Flaps 1. Flaps 2. And flaps 5. Flaps 10. Thousand feet. Landing lights on position. The light needs to change over to strobe and steady, and we need to make sure we know what the QNH is over here that we need to use for the airport. 1021. There is our runway already. So once we make the turn, it will be geared down, flaps 15, and a little bit more of a speed brake. Let's go down anyway to 115 already. And there is the ILS, so we go on to approach. Gear down, flaps 15. And we go to 1021 on the QNH. That was the last reported QNH for Johannesburg. And our VREF was 144 plus 5 gives 149. And we can go down one more flap and set our heading. Flaps 30. Landing checklist. Flaps, landing configuration. Speed brakes, armed. Landing gear down 3 green. And there is no rain as expected. That is one thing about the high veld weather for those of you who do not know this area. Once that thunderstorm hits, you've got 10-15 minutes, heavy rain, thunder and everything, and then it just disappears. I was quite looking forward to landing in the rain now, but anyway. The throttle disengage.
Approaching 03 right.
Autopilot disengage, and we have our hands on the stick.
Long landing, 9,000 feet remaining, 8,000 remaining.
Knots.
Mobile phones and small lightweight devices. Thank you for flying with us.
Runway vacated. Okay, to clean up, after landing checklist. Weather radar off. Engine start switches auto. Checked. APU on. Landing lights off. Position lights steady. Taxi lights on. Pro beat switches off. Transponder on standby. Welcome to Johannesburg. I love this rain effect on the window. I need to see where I'm going. Looking at the water drops. Thank you, Mr. Zibo. This really helps. This is so cool. So I'm just thinking I actually got part of my wish. At least there is rain when we're on the ground. It was unfortunately not while we're on finals and landing. But this is cool. This is so nice. Right, so there will not be any other traffic around because we're not flying online. So we don't need to bother to request clearance to cross runway 03 left.
Approaching 03 left.
If you were flying online and there was a traffic control, you would have asked them for clearance, and if you were on Unicom you would have broadcasted your intentions unless there was nobody. I mean, there's no point in doing that if there is nobody, but it's all just good manners to broadcast on Unicom, and obviously the ATC will not like it if you don't speak with him. This is the new NMG Johannesburg scenery. Thank you, Nico, and the rest of the guys there. Much appreciated that you guys actually did an XP11 version for us. Looks really nice. Lights and doors off and unlock. Parking brake set. APU generators needs to go on. Checked. Engine start levers both cut. Checked. No smoking and seatbelt signs off. Anti-collision light switch off. Fuel pump switches off. All off. The cabin utility switch off and the passenger seat switch off. Anti-ice checked off. Engine hydraulic pump switches off. Yaw damper goes off. The recirculation fan switches goes to off. Air conditioning pack switches remain auto. Isolation valve on. Engine bleed switches on. APU bleed on. Taxi and position light switches off. Ground power connect and switch on. APU can now go off. To secure the aircraft, we are going to follow the secure aircraft checklist. Emergency light switches off. Window heat all off. Air conditioning and pack switches off. Standby power switch goes off. And then the battery goes off, and we can actually switch ground power off as well. And now we are back to cold and dark, and we almost forgot the wipers. There we go. Guys, thank you for joining me. The gusts on takeoff were spectacular. One of the things I know about this aircraft is when it says to trim to 4, go to 6. Next time I'll follow my own advice and do that. With the gusts, as you would have seen on the ND, it was going crazy left and right. And the other issue I had was not disconnecting the reverse thruster properly. So we had a bit of an alarm there, but nothing to cry about, nothing serious. I enjoyed this flight. I hope you enjoyed your time with me. Thanks for visiting, and I hope to see you guys soon again.